What happens when a frail elderly woman is mocked and manhandled at an air show for trying to honor her hero husband? You won't believe how a single pilot's voice silences the crowd and turns the tide. I'm Marjorie Hensley, 82 years old, and I've never been one for crowds or commotion. But that September afternoon, as I stepped onto the Benton County Fairgrounds in Bentonville, Arkansas, I felt a pull in my chest. A quiet promise I'd made to my Leonard, gone now these past 15 years. The Razorback Air Show was in full swing, the air thick with the smell of grilled sausages, sweet kettle corn, and the sharp bite of jet fuel. The sun hung low, painting the fields gold, and the hum of engines mixed with the chatter of families sprawled on checkered blankets, kids chasing each other with sticky cotton candy hands. Overhead, planes carved arcs through the sky, their roars shaking the ground beneath my feet. I gripped my cane, its rubber tip sinking into the uneven grass, and clutched my canvas tote bag where Leonard's photograph rested, a small, sacred thing. I wasn't here for the spectacle. Lord knows I've seen enough planes in my time. Leonard used to talk about his A-10 Thunderbolt II like it was an extension of his soul, back when he flew in Korea. No, I came to keep a vow. There was a veterans memorial booth tucked away at the edge of the fairgrounds, or so the Bentonville Gazette had said. A simple tent, filled with artifacts from wars long past, where I could leave Leonard's photo. A young man in his flight suit, standing proud in front of his warplane, his smile bright despite the weight of those days. It was my way of keeping him alive, of making sure the world didn't forget the man who'd given so much. As I shuffled through the crowd, my joints aching with every step, I felt eyes on me. Not the kind that notice, but the kind that judge. My blue scarf, faded from years of wear, kept my silver hair in place, and my cardigan hung loose over my floral dress. I suppose I looked out of place among the bright t-shirts and baseball caps, but I've learned to ignore the stares. At my age, you get used to being invisible, or worse, a nuisance. Still, I kept my head high, my cane tapping a steady rhythm as I made my way toward the tent. That's when I heard them. A group of teenagers sprawled near a food truck, their laughter sharp as broken glass. The ringleader, a lanky boy with a backward cap, Tyler Grayson, I'd later learn, spotted me and nudged his friend. "Check it out," he said, loud enough to cut through the crowd's hum. "What's she doing here? Lost her way to the senior center?" His voice carried that cocky edge kids get when they think they own the world. His friend snickered, and I felt a familiar pang. Not anger, not yet, but the quiet ache of being dismissed. I kept walking, my eyes fixed on the veterans' tent, its red and white canopy just visible through the sea of people. I've heard worse than a few kids' taunts. Back when Leonard was overseas, I'd faced landlords who thought a soldier's wife couldn't pay rent, neighbors who whispered about my lonely life. I'd raised 3 kids on my own through those years, kept the house running, and never let the world see me break. A few loudmouths weren't going to stop me now. But Tyler wasn't done. He stepped into my path, his sneakers kicking up dust, his grin wide and cruel. "Hey, Grandma," he said, leaning in close enough for me to smell the soda on his breath. "This is an air show, not a knitting club. You gonna fly one of these planes or what?" His friends howled, and a girl with neon green nails, Kaylee Torres, I'd find out, pulled out her phone, her giggles grating as she started filming me. I stopped, my cane sinking deeper into the grass. My heart was steady, but my fingers tightened around the handle. I looked up at Tyler, meeting his eyes. They were brown, flecked with arrogance, the kind of eyes that hadn't seen enough of life to know better. "Young man," I said, my voice low but clear, "I'm here to pay my respects. Step aside, please." His grin didn't waver. "Pay respects?" he mocked, glancing at his friends. "What, you think you're some war hero? Come on, lady, you're slowing everyone down." There was no one behind me, just open space and a few curious onlookers, but his words drew more laughter. Kaylee's phone stayed trained on me, her voice narrating for her video. "Oh my God, she's so serious," she said, giggling. "This is gonna go viral." I felt the heat creeping up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from the slow burn of indignation. I've lived long enough to know the world doesn't always respect its elders, but there's something about being mocked for trying to do right that cuts deep. I thought of Leonard, The way he'd come home from Korea with a limp and a chest full of medals he never bragged about. He'd have shaken his head at these kids, maybe even laughed. But I wasn't him. I was just an old woman trying to keep a promise, and they were making it harder than it needed to be. I tried to step around Tyler, but he moved with me, blocking my path like it was a game. "Seriously, Grandma, go home," he said, his tone sharper now. "You're embarrassing yourself." That's when a man in a bright orange vest pushed through the crowd. His name tag read Dwayne Carver Security, and his shaved head gleamed under the sun. He was broad, with a scowl that said he'd rather be anywhere else. "What's going on here?" he barked, his eyes flicking between me and the teenagers. "She's causing a scene," Tyler said, quick as a whip. "Just wandering around, bothering people." I straightened, my cane steady despite the tremor in my hands. "That's a lie," I said, my voice firm. "I'm trying to get to the veterans' tent. I have something to leave there, for my husband." Dwayne's eyes swept over me. My cane, my scarf, my age, and his expression didn't soften. "Ma'am, this is for event attendees," he said, like I was some trespasser. "If you're not here for the show, you need to head back to the parking lot. We don't need any trouble." Trouble. The word landed like a slap. I'd come here to honor Leonard, to do something quiet and good, and now I was trouble. I felt the eyes of the crowd, some sympathetic, some impatient, most just watching like this was some kind of street performance. "I'm not causing trouble," I said, my voice rising just a fraction. "I'm here to leave a photograph at the veterans booth. It's important." Dwayne crossed his arms, his patience thinning. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this. Move along or I'll escort you out." His tone was final. Like my reasons didn't matter. Like I was just an old woman taking up space. I stood my ground, my cane digging into the dirt. I've faced worse than this. Doctors who told me Leonard wouldn't make it through the night. Creditors who hounded me when the bills piled up. Strangers who looked at me like I was nothing but a shadow of my younger self. But something about this moment, the laughter, the camera, the dismissal, lit a spark in me. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice clear as a bell. "Not until I do what I came here for." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering. Kaylee kept filming, her giggles like nails on a chalkboard. Tyler leaned in, his voice dripping with mockery. "What, you gonna fight him, Grandma? This I gotta see." I shot him a look, the kind I used to give my kids when they tested my patience. "You'd be surprised what an old woman can do when she's had enough," I said, my tone sharp but steady. A few people in the crowd chuckled, but it wasn't the cruel laughter of the teenagers. It was the kind that comes from recognizing a fight you've seen before. Dwayne stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "Ma'am, I'm not asking again. Let's go." He reached for my arm, his fingers brushing my sleeve, and I pulled back, my heart pounding. I wasn't scared, not really, but I was tired of being pushed aside, tired of being invisible. I clutched my tote bag, feeling the edges of Leonard's photo inside. It was all I had left of him, and I wasn't letting these people take that away. The loudspeaker crackled, announcing the next act, a low-altitude flyover by an A-10 Thunderbolt II, piloted by Major Lucas Brennan. The crowd's attention shifted, heads turning skyward as the plane's growl rumbled in the distance. I glanced up, my breath catching. That plane, Leonard's plane, the same squat, rugged beast he'd flown, the one he'd loved like a brother. For a moment I was back in 1953, waiting for him to come home, praying the skies would bring him back to me. Dwayne grabbed my arm, not hard, but firm, and started pulling me toward the exit. "Come on, let's not make this harder than it needs to be," he said, his voice all business. I yanked my arm free, my cane wobbling as I steadied myself. "Don't you dare!" I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I have every right to be here, and you're not going to stop me." The crowd hushed, the plane's roar filling the silence. Tyler's laughter faltered, and even Kaylee's camera wavered. I stood tall, my heart racing, but my resolve unbreakable. I wasn't just an old woman anymore. I was Marjorie Hensley, wife of Staff Sergeant Leonard Hensley, and I was here to keep a promise. I stood there, Marjorie Hensley, 82 years young, with my cane planted in the dusty grass of the Benton County Fairgrounds, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The Razorback Air Show roared on around me, the A-10 Thunderbolt II tearing through the Arkansas sky, its engines shaking the ground like some great beast waking from slumber. The crowd cheered, their faces turned upward. But I was locked in a different kind of battle. My arm still stung where Dwayne Carver, that bull of a security guard, had grabbed me, and the sting of humiliation burned hotter than the late September sun. Those teenagers, Tyler Grayson and his pack, led by Kaylee Torres with her phone pointed at me like a weapon, were still at it, their laughter slicing through the air. "Give it up, Grandma," Tyler jeered, his voice loud enough to draw more eyes. "You're making a fool of yourself." A fool. Me, a woman who'd raised 3 kids through war and hardship, who'd kept my head high when Leonard came home from Korea with a limp and a heart full of shadows. I'd come here to honor him, to leave his photograph at the Veterans Memorial booth. A simple act, a promise kept. But now I was surrounded by mocking kids, a crowd that wouldn't speak up, and a guard who saw me as nothing but trouble. My fingers tightened on my cane, the rubber tip digging into the earth. I wasn't going anywhere. Kaylee's phone stayed on me, her neon green nails flashing as she zoomed in. "This is so sad," she giggled, narrating for her video. Like, who even let her out of the nursing home? Her friends howled, and I felt the weight of their words, each one a pebble piling on my chest. I've lived long enough to know cruelty doesn't always come with fists. Sometimes it's just a smirk, a camera, a crowd that looks away. A few folks nearby shifted, their faces uneasy, but they stayed silent. Typical, I thought, my lips twitching with a bitter smile. Everyone's brave until it's time to stand up. Dwayne loomed over me, his orange vest glaring under the sun. "Ma'am, I've told you," he said, his voice hard as gravel. "You're causing a disturbance. Let's go." He reached for my arm again, and I stepped back, my cane wobbling but holding me steady. My tote bag, with Leonard's photo inside, swung against my hip, a reminder of why I was here. "I'm not disturbing anything," I said, my voice low but sharp, the kind I used when my kids thought they could outsmart me. "I came to leave something at the veterans booth. You're the one making this a problem, son." I added that last word with a touch of bite, knowing it'd sting a man like him, all puffed up with authority. Dwayne's face reddened, his jaw tightening. "Don't call me that," he snapped, "and don't make this harder than it needs to be." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me, and I felt the crowd's eyes boring into my back. Tyler's laughter rang out again, and Kaylee's camera didn't waver. I could almost hear her planning her caption. "Crazy old lady gets owned at air show." I was tired, not just from the walk or the heat or the ache in my joints, but from the way the world kept trying to push me aside. I thought of Leonard, the way he'd sit on our porch on Fernwood Drive, telling stories of his A-10 missions, his voice steady even when his hands shook. He'd faced worse than this: enemy fire, crash landings, nights wondering if he'd see morning. If he could keep going, so could I. "You don't scare me," I said to Dwayne, my voice calm but unyielding. "I've seen bigger bullies than you, and I'm still here." The crowd murmured, some with surprise, others with disapproval. Tyler leaned in, his grin wide. "Oh, she's got some fight in her," he said, mocking. "What's next, Grandma? You gonna karate chop him?" His friends burst out laughing, and I shot him a look that could have curdled milk. "Keep talking, boy," I said. "You're digging your own hole." A few folks in the crowd chuckled, and I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Let them laugh, at him, not me. Before Dwayne could grab me again, a voice cut through the noise. "What's going on here?" It was a woman, her tone sharp but steady, pushing through the crowd like she owned the place. She wore a volunteer badge that read Sandra Whitlock Veterans Association, her dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her eyes flicked over the scene, me, Dwayne, the jeering kids, and narrowed with something like righteous anger. "She's causing trouble," Dwayne said, jerking his thumb at me. "Won't move, won't listen. I'm taking her out." Sandra's gaze landed on me, taking in my cane, my scarf, the way I stood like I wasn't backing down. "Doesn't look like trouble to me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Marjorie Hensley," I said, my chin lifting. "I'm trying to get to your booth. I've got something to leave there. For my husband, Leonard." My voice caught on his name, just a fraction. But I held steady. Leonard deserved better than me falling apart in front of these people. Sandra's expression softened, but Tyler wasn't letting it go. "Oh, come on," he scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's just some old lady fishing for attention. Probably doesn't even know what the booth's for." His friend snickered, and Kaylee's camera stayed on me, her giggles like a swarm of gnats. Sandra turned on him, her eyes flashing. "You've said enough, young man," she snapped. "Show some respect, or you'll be the one leaving." Her words were like a whip, but Tyler just mimicked her tone, earning more laughs from his crew. I shook my head, a wry smile tugging at my lips. Kids like him think they're untouchable, but life has a way of teaching lessons they don't see coming. I reached into my tote bag, my fingers brushing the edges of Leonard's photo. "This is why I'm here," I said, holding it up for Sandra to see. The crowd leaned in, curious, as I showed her the faded image. Leonard in his flight suit, standing in front of his A-10, his smile bright against the gray of war. "My husband flew A-10S in Korea. I promised I'd bring this to your booth. That's all I want." Sandra's eyes widened, and she stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Mrs. Hensley, I'm so sorry. Let me get you to the booth right now." Her kindness was a balm, but it didn't last long. Dwayne stepped between us, his arms crossed like a wall. "Doesn't matter," he said, his voice flat. "She's disrupting the event. Rules are rules." He reached for my arm again, and I pulled back, my cane digging into the dirt. My heart was racing now, not from fear, but from the sheer injustice of it all. I'd come here to do something good, something quiet, and they were turning it into a spectacle. "Don't you touch me," I said, my voice low and fierce, the kind I'd used when my son tried to sneak out at 16. "I've dealt with worse than you, and I'm not moving until I finish what I started." The crowd hushed, and even Tyler's laughter faltered. Kaylee's camera wavered, but she kept filming, her giggles sounding forced now. Sandra stepped forward, placing herself between me and Dwayne. "You're not escorting anyone anywhere," she said, her voice like steel. "This woman has every right to be here, and I'm taking her to the booth." Dwayne's face twisted, his authority challenged. "You don't call the shots, lady," he said, gesturing to another guard, a younger man named Jamal Dorsey, who'd been watching from the sidelines. "Jamal, help me get her out." Jamal hesitated, his eyes flicking to me, then to the photo in my hand. He looked torn, like he knew this wasn't right, but didn't know how to say it. I met his gaze, my voice softer now. "Son, you don't have to do this," I said. "I'm just an old woman trying to keep a promise." Before Jamal could respond, a new voice boomed from the crowd. "What in the name of heaven is going on here?" It was a man, broad-shouldered and weathered, wearing a faded Air Force cap and a leather jacket that smelled of oil and history. His name was Vernon Tate, I'd learn later, a retired mechanic who'd spent his life wrenching on A-10S. He stormed through the crowd, his eyes blazing with indignation. Sandra turned to him, relief washing over her face. "Vernon, thank God. This woman's trying to reach our booth, but security's giving her a hard time." Vernon's gaze swept over the scene. My trembling hands, Dwayne's aggressive stance, the teenager's smirks. "You're telling me this lady's getting hassled for honoring a veteran?" he said, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in hangars and airfields. "That's not happening on my watch." Dwayne bristled. "Sir, stay out of this," he said. "She's causing a disturbance, and I'm handling it." "Handling it?" Vernon snapped, stepping closer. "Looks like you're bullying an old woman. Back off now." His presence was like a storm cloud, heavy and unyielding. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Tyler and his friends quieted, their bravado cracking, but Kaylee kept her phone up, determined to catch every second. I stood there, my heart pounding, my fingers clutching Leonard's photo. I hadn't wanted this. A crowd, a fight, all these eyes on me. I just wanted to leave his picture, to keep his memory alive in my small way. But now, surrounded by shouting voices and accusing stares, I felt the weight of it all pressing down. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Leonard, for every promise we'd made to each other, and I wasn't giving up. I'm Marjorie Hensley, and at 82, I've learned that life doesn't always hand you justice on a silver platter. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, cane in hand, heart pounding, and demand it. That's where I was, rooted in the dusty grass of the Benton County Fairgrounds, surrounded by a crowd that buzzed like bees around a kicked hive. The Razorback Air Show roared on, the A-10 Thunderbolt II growling overhead, its shadow sweeping over us like a memory of my Leonard. My arm still smarted from Dwayne Carver's grip, that security guard with a scowl as wide as Arkansas. Those teenagers, Tyler Grayson, Kaylee Torres, and their pack, hovered nearby, their laughter fading but their phones still out, ready to turn my pain into their entertainment. Vernon Tate, the retired Air Force mechanic, stood like a weathered oak beside me, his eyes blazing at Dwayne. Sandra Whitlock, from the Veterans Association, was at my other side, her presence a quiet strength. My fingers clutched Leonard's photograph, its edges worn from years of love, and I wasn't about to let anyone take this moment from me. Dwayne's patience was gone, his face red as a summer tomato. "This is over," he barked, stepping toward me. "You're all causing a scene. Ma'am, you're leaving now." He reached for my arm, but Vernon moved faster, his broad frame blocking the guard like a wall. "Lay a hand on her again, and you'll wish you hadn't," Vernon said, his voice low, the kind that carried weight from years turning wrenches on warplanes. Dwayne froze, his eyes darting between Vernon's steely gaze and the crowd, now thick around us. Jamal Dorsey, the younger guard, shifted uneasily, his hands twitching like he didn't know which side to pick. The air was thick with tension, the A-10's roar fading as it banked for another pass. Tyler's friends whispered, their smirks cracking, but Kaylee kept her phone up, her neon green nails flashing. "This is getting good," she muttered, still filming. I stood tall, my cane steady despite the ache in my joints. "I'm not here to fight," I said, holding up Leonard's photo, my voice clear enough to cut through the murmurs. "I came to honor my husband, Leonard Hensley. He flew A-10S in Korea, risked his life for this country. All I want is to leave this at the veterans' booth. You're the ones turning this into a circus." The crowd quieted, their eyes on the faded photograph. Leonard in his flight suit, standing proud in front of his A-10, his smile bright against the gray of war. Sandra's hand rested on my shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "Mrs. Hensley, I'll make sure you get to the booth. This nonsense stops now." Dwayne wasn't backing down. "Don't care who her husband was," he snapped, his arms crossed. "She's disrupting the event. Rules are rules." He nodded at Jamal. "Get her out of here." Jamal hesitated, his eyes locked on the photo in my hand. I met his gaze, my voice softer now. "Son, you know this ain't right," I said. "I'm just an old woman keeping a promise." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might step aside. But before he could move, the loudspeaker crackled, sharp and sudden, silencing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "we're pausing the A-10 Thunderbolt II demonstration for a special announcement. Please turn your attention to the main stage." Every head swiveled toward the stage at the center of the fairgrounds, where a man in a flight suit stood, microphone in hand. My breath caught as I recognized the A-10's silhouette in the distance, now circling slowly, its engines a low rumble. The man was Major Lucas Brennan, the pilot, his face serious but calm under his helmet's visor. The crowd whispered, confused, some craning their necks to see what was happening. I felt a prickle down my spine, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Major Brennan said, his voice steady, carrying across the fairgrounds. "I've just been told about an incident near the veterans' booth. A woman here to honor a hero is being treated with disrespect. That's not what this air show stands for. That's not what we stand for." Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turning back to me. Dwayne's face drained of color, his bravado crumbling like dry clay. Tyler's friends lowered their phones, their faces flushed, and Kaylee's camera wavered, her giggles gone. Vernon's jaw tightened, a flicker of pride in his eyes, and Sandra squeezed my shoulder, her breath catching. I stood frozen, my heart racing, Leonard's photo trembling in my hand. I hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted to be the center of a spectacle. But here I was, and I wasn't backing down. Major Brennan's voice softened, but it carried the weight of command. "Mrs. Marjorie Hensley is here to honor her husband, Staff Sergeant Leonard Hensley, who flew A-10S in the Korean War. He was a hero, a man who served with courage, and she's being denied the chance to pay tribute to him. That ends now." The crowd erupted, applause swelling like a wave. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back, my chin lifting. Sandra whispered, "You're doing it, Marjorie. For Leonard." Vernon nodded, his eyes shining with something like awe. Dwayne took a step back, his hands falling to his sides, his authority stripped away. Jamal looked at the ground, his shoulders sagging, like he wished he could disappear. Major Brennan raised a hand, his voice warm now. "Mrs. Hensley, I'd be honored if you'd join me on the main stage. We want to hear your husband's story, and we want to make this right." The applause grew louder, cheers mixing with claps, some folks wiping their eyes. My knees felt weak, but I straightened, my cane steady. "Come on, Marjorie," Sandra said, her voice gentle. "Let's go." Dwayne opened his mouth, but Vernon cut him off with a look that could have stopped a tank. "Don't even try it," Vernon said, his voice low. Dwayne stepped back, his face a mix of shame and frustration. Jamal stayed put, his eyes still on the ground, and I felt a pang of pity for him. He was young, caught in a moment bigger than he'd expected. Sandra and Vernon flanked me as we moved through the crowd, which parted like the Red Sea. People clapped, some called out, "You go, ma'am," and "Thank you." A woman with a stroller dabbed her eyes, and an old man in a Vietnam vet cap saluted me, his hand trembling. I kept my eyes forward, my heart pounding, Leonard's photo in my hand like a talisman. Tyler and his friends had slipped to the edge of the crowd, their phones down, their faces red. Kaylee's camera was off, her bravado gone, and I couldn't help a wry smile. "Not so funny now, is it?" I muttered under my breath. As we reached the stage, Major Brennan stepped down, his flight suit crisp, his hand extended. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, his voice warm, "it's an honor." He helped me up the steps, my cane tapping softly, and I felt the crowd's eyes on me, not with pity now, but with respect. The applause roared, louder than the A-10's engines, and I stood at the microphone, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I didn't come here for this," I said, holding up Leonard's photo, my words clear despite the lump in my throat. "I just wanted to leave this at the veterans' booth, to remember my husband. Leonard Hensley flew A-10S in Korea. He was brave and kind, and he loved this country more than himself. I promised I'd keep his memory alive, and that's all I was trying to do." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I felt Leonard's presence, like he was standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder. Major Brennan nodded, his eyes full of respect. "Mrs. Hensley," he said, "we're going to make sure Staff Sergeant Hensley's memory is honored. His photo will have a place of pride at the veterans' booth, and I'm dedicating today's A-10 flyover to him." Tears welled up, but I held them back, nodding. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice breaking just a fraction. The crowd erupted again, cheers and applause shaking the fairgrounds. Major Brennan raised a hand, and the A-10 roared back to life, performing a slow, graceful pass overhead, its engines a tribute to Leonard's legacy. I watched, my heart full, as the plane soared into the sky, its silhouette sharp against the golden horizon. Sandra helped me down the steps, Vernon at my side, and we made our way to the veterans' booth. The crowd parted again, their applause following us. I laid Leonard's photo on the table, beside medals and letters from other heroes, and ran my fingers over its edges one last time. "You're home now," I whispered. Dwayne stood off to the side, silent, his face red with shame. Tyler and his friends were gone, slipped away like shadows, their laughter forgotten. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. I'd kept my promise, and in doing so, I'd reminded everyone what honor means. As I walked away, my cane tapping the grass, the A-10's roar echoed behind me, and I felt Leonard's smile in my heart.